The Shadow of the White House, the 1933 Business Plot. Chapter 1, A Nation on the Brink. In 1933, America was gasping for air. The Great Depression had turned the American dream into a breadline nightmare. Unemployment sat at 25%, and the veterans of World War I, the Bonus Army, had recently been cleared out of Washington, D.C. with tanks and tear gas. In the midst of this chaos, Franklin D. Roosevelt, FDR, took office. To the working class, he was a savior. To the ultra-wealthy elite and Wall Street titans, he was a traitor to his class, whose New Deal smelled like creeping socialism. Chapter 2, The Unlikely Hero. Enter Smedley Butler. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a legend. A Major General in the Marine Corps and a two-time Medal of Honor recipient, Butler was known as Old Gimlet Eye. He was the most decorated Marine in history at the time. However, Butler had a change of heart late in life. He began delivering speeches titled, "War is a Racket," arguing that the military was often used as a high-class muscle man for big business. This made him the perfect target, or so the conspirators thought. Chapter 3, The Approach. In July 1933, a wealthy bond broker named Gerald C. McGuire approached Butler. McGuire claimed to represent a group of powerful industrialists who were deeply concerned about FDR's policies, specifically his decision to take the U.S. off the gold standard. The plan was audacious. The Army, McGuire wanted Butler to lead a private army of 500,000 veterans. The Coup, this army would march on Washington, D.C. The puppet, they wouldn't kill FDR, they would help him. They wanted to create a new position, a Secretary of General Welfare, effectively a dictator who would handle all the actual governing while FDR became a figurehead. Chapter 4, The Money Trail. McGuire claimed the plot was backed by the American Liberty League, a group of ultra-wealthy executives from companies like Chase Bank, Maxwell House, and General Motors. They allegedly had $300 million in 1930s money ready to fund the operation. Butler played along, gathering information while his inner alarm bells screamed. He realized these men weren't just venting, they were organizing. Chapter 5, The Whistleblower. Instead of leading the march, Smedley Butler went to the authorities. In 1934, he testified before the McCormick-Dickstein Committee, the precursor to the House Un-American Activities Committee. I appeared before the Congressional Committee, and told them that there was a movement afoot to break the government and substitute a fascist regime, Butler later told the public. Chapter 6, The Aftermath and the Realism. The committee's final report confirmed Butler's story. They stated that there is no question that these attempts were discussed, were planned, and might have been placed in execution. Why does this feel so real today? Economic inequality. The tension between the 1% and the working class remains a central theme in American politics. The deep state narrative, the idea of unelected power brokers influencing the White House, is a constant modern anxiety. Corporate power. The plot highlights the historical struggle between government regulation and corporate autonomy. Historical reflection. Despite the evidence, no one was ever prosecuted. The media at the time, largely owned by the very people implicated, tried to paint Butler as crazy or delusional. Yet, the official government records stand as a chilling. Chapter 7, The Silence of the Gavel. The McCormick-Dickstein Committee's investigation ended with a whimper rather than a bang. While their final report to the House of Representatives in 1935 stated that Butler's allegations were alarmingly true, no subpoenas were ever issued to the titans of industry named in the plot. The J.P. Morgans, the Rockefellers, and the leaders of the American Liberty League were never forced to testify under oath. The public was left in a state of confusion. Major newspapers, many of which had financial ties to the accused industrialists, ridiculed Smedley Butler. The New York Times initially treated the story as a gigantic hoax, though they later walked back some of their skepticism when the committee's findings became official. Chapter 8, Why the Plot Failed. History suggests the plot failed for three main reasons. The wrong general. The conspirators fundamentally misunderstood Smedley Butler. They thought his military background meant he would favor a fascist-style order. Instead, his loyalty to the Constitution and the common soldier was unshakable. FDR's popularity. By the time the plot was supposed to move forward, the New Deal was already beginning to provide relief. Any attempt to overthrow FDR would have likely resulted in a bloody civil war, as the masses adored him. The whistleblower's speed. Butler acted before the 500,000 veterans could be organized into a cohesive force. By bringing the light of public scrutiny to the shadows, he killed the momentum of the movement. Chapter 9, The Legacy of Old Gimlet I. Smedley Butler died in 1940, just before America entered World War II. He remained a fierce critic of what we now call the military-industrial complex. For decades, the business plot was relegated to a footnote in history books, often dismissed as a fringe theory, until the declassification of committee documents in the late 20th century proved that the threat was very much real. Final reflection, a warning for the ages. The 1933 business plot serves as a chilling reminder that democracy is often more fragile than it appears. It proves that wealth can be weaponized. When economic interests feel threatened by government policy, the temptation to bypass democracy becomes high. Integrity matters. A single person of high character, like Butler, can be the only thing standing between a republic and a dictatorship. History echoes the themes of 1933, unrest, veteran grievances, and the influence of the ultra-wealthy, remain remarkably relevant in modern political discourse. Epilogue, The Ghost in the Machine. The most haunting aspect of the 1933 business plot isn't that it happened, but how easily it was scrubbed from the collective memory of the nation. For decades, it existed only in the dusty archives of congressional records, while the men accused of funding it continued to build the skyscrapers and foundations that define modern America. The what if Smedley Butler had been a different man, if he had been motivated by greed or a thirst for power, the United States might have entered the 1940s not as the arsenal of democracy, but as a corporate-controlled fascist state. The line between the world we know and the dark alternative history was a single man's sense of duty. The final lesson. History tells us that democracy is not a self-sustaining machine, it is a fragile agreement. The business plot remains a shadow in American history because it forces us to acknowledge a difficult truth, that the greatest threats to a nation often don't come from foreign invaders, but from within, driven by the very institutions meant to ensure its prosperity. As Butler himself famously warned, I spent 33 years, being a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street and the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism. By refusing to play that role one last time, Old Gimlet I saved the Republic. But the plot serves as a permanent reminder, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. The end.